Just first, exciting day. I mean, this is in some ways 2 or 3 years in the making. With Ben Bowen, he's someone that I had seen at our team camp when at the University of Northern Colorado playing with his high school team back when he was a freshman. And back then he was probably about 6 foot, 150 pounds. And remember telling him, hey, one day, a few years from now, you're going to be the best player in the gym. Just kind of seeing the way that he moved, his feel for the game, and then knowing, too, that he wasn't going to be 6 foot for very long. I mean, his dad, Ryan Bowen, who's an assistant coach for the Nuggets, who played in the NBA for a long time, 6'8", 6'9", and so you could just see in the case of Ben that he wasn't gonna he was gonna his best days were ahead of him. I used the comparison of Hayden Dalton, having remembered Hayden back when he was working at Big Bill's Pizza, as a waiter, going into his senior year of high school and going into his freshman year at Central Wyoming. I mean, he was about 6'2", 6'3". In the case of Ben, and when you do your homework, and something big for me is trying to find those guys that are young seniors. And Ben was a guy that is 17 right now. He won't turn 18 until August when he gets to the University of Wyoming. And so a guy like him who's young, who hasn't really, in terms of maturity-wise, I mean, he's the guy that you can just tell that he's going to definitely continue to grow and develop. And I think that's the biggest thing with him is that you just got to look for the upside. And he's a guy that I think right now, as is, at being a 6'5" guard that's really skilled, who can shoot and can play the way I want to play. I mean, he's going to be a good player. But then you add the fact that now, kind of like Chandler Hutchison, who I recruited at Boise State, who showed up at 6'5", and then lo and behold leaves at 6'8" because he kind of fits the same variables. Was a June birthday, a guy that probably hadn't hit puberty until he probably got to the junior senior year of high school, and so you knew there was room for growth, and that's what we saw in the case of Ben. And I think he's a guy like Hayden who's going to surprise a lot of people as he makes his way down the road here at the University of Wyoming. And then Nate Barnhart's a guy that, when I got the job, we didn't, even though at times right now and with COVID, I'd like to have a few more guys on the practice floor, but I wanted to make sure. I think the mistake sometimes when you get jobs in the springtime is that you try to fill all your 13 scholarships. And in the springtime, it's a lot of supply and demand, and usually there's not as much supply, and you end up getting some guys that, especially at this level, who are not good enough to play. And so I didn't want to come in and use all 13 scholarships, knowing that the four returning players were going to play minutes, knowing that some of the guys that we were bringing in, I was expecting them to play minutes. And so it's hard to keep 13 guys happy. And so knowing that, with Ben, that there was going to be a good chance that we were going to be able to get him, and then just then kind of seeing, well, what else do we need? And using the summertime and then using the fall to kind of see, what best fits us and what do we, and sometimes needs a bad evaluator. You just want to make sure you get a good player. But, we kind of dove in kind of thinking that we needed another bigger body. And in the case of Nate, a guy that, I really believe if all things were the same without COVID, and if he had been on the summer scene, having played for one of the best AAU programs in the country, KC Run GMC, he's a guy that would have been really highly recruited. I mean, he's a guy that's 7 feet tall. He can run, he can jump, he can shoot. We've seen his highlight films, but he's a guy that it's hard, and that's where the thing I think with COVID, and if you do your job as a coaching staff, I think COVID really showed over the course of the last 7-8 months is the guys that really love to play, the guys that want to be in the gym or find ways to get in a gym, because it was hard, especially early on, to find a gym to get in and play. And a lot of guys, they really don't like it enough to go and find a way to get into a church gym or to find a way to get into the high school gym. And with these two guys, they were guys that were just, they loved the game, they lived the game, and they wanted to be in the gym. They found ways to be in the gym. And those are the type of guys that we want to build our program around. I think we got guys like that in the program right now. And if you can continue to add guys like that, I think that's a winning recipe here at the University of Wyoming.
All right, guys, go ahead and ask the question.
Jeff, how's it going?
Good, Michael.
You kind of had the same situation when you got here with COVID had just kind of started, and you had decided a recruiting class kind of on the fly. How was this one different, and how has the COVID challenge been recruiting-wise? I imagine it's in some ways probably a nightmare, but like you said, in some ways you kind of learn a lot about the kids.
Yeah, and luckily for us, we didn't have to sign a lot of guys. And in the beauty of when I got the job and the kids that we had signed, we had a pretty good idea of who they were, knowing that Marcus Williams and Xavier Dussel had both signed with us at the University of Northern Colorado. Graham Ike was somebody that that we had spent a lot of time recruiting as well, and so we knew exactly what we were getting with those guys. And I think in the case of with Ben, having known him for so long, my nephew plays with him on his high school team, knowing his high school coach, Coach Wood, who was a former Division I player, whose dad was a former, NCAA Division II coach at Shattern State, Bob Wood. Those guys, they're in the right hands, and so that's where we really felt good in terms of our evaluations, with Ben and Nate, knowing that people around them were going to they were going to shoot us straight. And I think that's the time, the trick in recruiting sometimes is trying to get through the smoke screen, because everybody's, most of the time they're going to tell you, okay, are they a good kid? Yes. I mean, this, and they're going to give you all the answers that you want to hear. But when you can really get down to knowing, okay, who they really are as people, and that's what we really try to do. And both come from unbelievable families. Nate's sister actually plays volleyball at South Florida. She had visited here a few years back before deciding to sign with the South Florida. And so we just knew that ultimately you got to bank on character, and these two kids are as a high character kids that you could possibly have.
Cody, go ahead.
Jeff, what does it mean to you that a guy like Nate, too, during a time in COVID, would get in a car with his family and drive all the way across, the Midwest and all the way into Wyoming to come check out a school when he can't even come visit you? He can't really, go see stuff, can't go in the AA, but he wanted to go do that. And is it true that Vanderveer found him a long time ago?
Yeah, and, it just shows you in terms of, that just the adjustments that you have to make with COVID. We're in a dead period still, and that dead period will probably be extended for, quite a while. And so you got to adjust. The kids have to adjust. And luckily for, Nate, his parents were able to take some time off to drive him out here. And it's not like, I've made that drive many a times, at least from Denver towards that neck of the woods when I was an assistant in Emporia State back in the day. And so I know the drive, and I know that cell phone service is a lot better now than it was back in the early 2000s. Between Denver to Salina, Kansas, about 6 hours, you'd never have any cell phone service. So I think the cell phone service is probably a little bit better between Kansas City and here. And so for us to be able to have him come out, which under the rules technically, if they set up a campus tour through admissions on their own, we're able to do that. And luckily we have some tremendous people within our admissions and campus tour office that did a tremendous job of showing them around and just giving them an idea of what they were, kind of getting themselves into. Because just like the guys that signed in the spring, they had no idea. Luckily they weren't here, June 3rd when it decided to snow 8-10 inches. But they did get to see the reality of October and, when the temperature can go down. But, luckily for us, though, they had the means to do that. And then in the case of Ben was down in Denver. He had actually came up a little bit earlier before his dad got, pushed into the bubble down in Orlando with the Nuggets. And so he was able to come up here and kind of see it on his own. And then once the Nuggets got done, Ben and his mom and dad were both able to come back up here again and do a campus tour. And then Coach V, he was, at his time at Emporia State, he knows that Kansas City area really well, and that's an area that, he really focuses in on, especially on the Kansas side. Coach Wicks having his time at Missouri Western, kind of more on the Kansas City, Missouri side. Those two guys do a good job of trying to evaluate guys in that area. And I think that's an area, too, where you can find some guys that kind of get overlooked. Some guys get really over-recruited out of Kansas City, and then there's some guys that turn out to be some pretty good players that are under-recruited.
Jeff, I know that the way the roster is constructed now, you guys are right. You're at the scholarship limit for next season. I'm just curious, was limited amount of scholarships available? How selective did you have to be in the offers you were giving out and signing kids?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, hopefully we're always really selective, but we did know that, hey, we needed certain guys in certain spots. We knew we needed another guard based off our kind of depth there. And then you can never have, I guess you can have too many bigs because it's hard to play them all, and especially the way that we play. But to have some depth there at that position, which now when you look at our roster, with Owen Nelson, with Hunter Thompson, with Graham Ike, and now you add Nate to the mix. I mean, those are four guys that all kind of bring different things to the equation, and so it's one of those deals where we didn't rush into it. When I got the job, it took me a little while to kind of say, okay, is Ben going to fit what we do? And then after we kind of had some, went through a few things and saw some guys, we felt like he would be a good fit. And then in the case of Nate, it took us a little bit longer, and we really wanted to see our guys practice before we decided, hey, where are we going to go with this last scholarship? And so at the end of the day, we really just wanted, like I said, the character piece, which all coaches speak. They always say they get great character kids, but you guys have been doing this long enough too to realize that that's always not the case. But for us, we always talk to our guys. You're going to be held accountable to four things every day. one, your character; two, your communication; three, your body language; and four, your response. And we feel like when the kids know that on the front end. It's going to really try to minimize some of the risk of some of the guys that you take.
Is Grigsby still going to be on scholarship for this season?
He's on scholarship for this season, but moving forward to next season, he will not be on scholarship.
Does the fact that you don't have any seniors on this year's team make it easier to focus on that high school level?
Yeah, it really does. And with where our roster's set up, and knowing too, and Ben knows this, and Nate knows this as well, is that a big thing for them is that they're going to have to develop their bodies. Ben right now is 6'5", probably 180, 85 pounds. He knows that he's the biggest adjustment for him from the high school to college level is going to be strength. And then in the case of Nate, who's a legit 7 feet. It's not one of those deals where you say he's 7 feet and then he walks in and he's 6'10". He is a legit 7 feet, but he also weighs about 185 pounds. And so, the biggest thing for them, and knowing too that with our roster that, hey, if they come in here and they show that they can come and compete for minutes, hey, we're going to play the best players regardless of who they are. But we also know too that we can also take a chance and let those guys and not feel like we have to rush their development and making sure that we do it the right way. And so they both knew that on the front end, and they're both smart kids, and they both come from families that played Division I sports, and they realize that where they're at and they're not delusional. And I think that's the big thing too in recruiting is eliminating delusional, because there's a lot of delusional kids out there and a lot of delusional parents. And I think we're very lucky to find two kids that come from backgrounds and from parents and coaches that are not delusional.
I believe Nick fished up the stat that Nate is the first 7-footer at Wyoming since like the 2009-2010 season. Kind of crazy that's a decade ago, but just that sort of length is pretty rare. How can he sort of, I don't want to say change the way you do things, but how can he make things different for you guys?
Yeah, he's not going to make anything really different from the fact that offensively, he's a lot like Thompson offensively, where he can really stretch the floor. I'm not going to try to turn him into something that he's not. I know everybody wants Thompson to be this bruiser and banger down low. Well, that's just not who he is. And I'm not going to be a fool and try to play him to his weaknesses and not play him to his strengths. And just in the case with Nate, Nate's a guy that's really skilled. He's more of a guard. But like Thompson, he has the ability, especially, and there'll be times when we demand him to get inside, when teams want to switch and do certain things like that. But I do think the case of Nate is he's a really good athlete, and I think he can really protect the rim, and especially the way that we want to defend, and we put such an emphasis taking away the three is to have a big like him who can protect the rim with his length and size. I think that really gives us an advantage. And then you look at the case of like Graham Ike, who's also going to be a freshman as well, along with everybody else since they get their year back. But Graham's a guy. He's 6'9", but then he has a 7'6" wingspan. And so to have somebody like that, even though he's not necessarily 7 foot, and he's going to play a lot bigger than what he is because of that wingspan.
So, Jeff, speaking of Graham, when the news came that freshmen will keep their year, or everybody will keep their year, is there a chance we'll see Graham on the court now this year without the threat of burning a red shirt?
Yeah, and we've talked about it, and we're not going to just throw him into the mix. And he's gradually kind of getting more acclimated. He actually did some 5-on-0 stuff today. He's at about 9 months in his recovery process. We won't clear him until he's at least at a year. Especially being a guy like him who's bigger. But, it's a lot like football where, those football players, back before everybody got a free year, you have those, 3 games that you could play at the end of your freshman year if you're redshirting, which I think is a huge thing. And so for us, the plan is if the doctors and everybody agrees that's the best thing for him, to be able to get him some of that experience, which I think is invaluable. And so it won't be anytime soon. It'll be more towards conference play. But the plan is if his body's ready to go and the doctors are okay with it and he feels good with it, then we plan on playing him.
Jeff, so you guys are back on the floor practicing?
We were back first time today, back at it.
Is everybody available, or are you still missing some guys?
No, we got most everybody. I mean, we still, the guy that tested, he's still having to clear through all the protocol stuff. But as of right now, we had the guys on the floor and just trying to find a way to get back in shape again.
So, Jeff, once the season starts, if you have a guy test positive, will you have to shut everything down for 10 days, 2 weeks, or what are the protocols going to look like?
Well, hopefully, as things change on a daily basis, and who knows what today is might not be what tomorrow is. But I think as we move forward, really doing a good job of, especially when we can control the environment when they're here. Now, it's on them once they leave the AA, leave the locker room, leave the training room, that when they're on their own, that they got to be smart in terms of who they associate with and who they surround themselves with, because we can't do anything about contact tracing. But when they're here, just making sure that we film practice, knowing that we can minimize the contact between people, to where now if somebody were to test positive again, that we can go back and look at the film and say, hey, over the course of the last 24 hours, that when we were going live, that there wasn't 15 minutes of contact between that person and that person. And so just being really organized and marking our floor. If you saw our floor right now, there's a lot of red tape, and just letting guys know when, hey, you're sitting out or you're standing on the side, go find one of those red X's, because that means you're socially distanced 6 feet and we won't get hit with close contact.
Obviously, we got the new Mountain West sort of scheduling situation a couple of days ago. I know you've been on the record as saying you were in favor of the 20-game schedule, obviously, with the different road trips and the series situation. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how it's all going to play out, and what the challenges are, in having those 2 games with 1 day in between. And I imagine it's going to be quite different for everybody.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine as how it's all going to play out. The biggest thing with this year is just trying to play as many games as we possibly can. That's the ultimate goal. How many are we going to play? I have no idea. As the way this thing's kind of evolving right now, it doesn't look very good for a lot of games. And I thought that the Mountain West made a smart decision by moving to 20 games, where we know kind of everybody's under the same testing guidelines and protocols, and then 2, minimizing the travel. I thought the first schedule that came out, where it was pretty much what they've done in the past. Having our guys going from here to there in airplanes, I just didn't see how it was going to work. And so I think the decision that they made to go to 2 games, in one location and having basically 5 home and away series. I just think that gives us a lot better chance to make sure that we play as many games as possible. And then there's also the other side too that people forget, is that you got to make sure referees are there too. And the referees are under the same testing guidelines and protocols as the coaches and players are. And so making sure that you have 3 officials there for games is going to be a challenge as well.
On that same note, Jeff, just how much of a challenge was it to put together that new non-conference schedule, particularly the MTE, because I know that's obviously fewer teams than you guys had scheduled originally.
Yeah, it's scheduling like recruiting. I mean, it's it can be a mess, and when your schedule basically just implodes and contracts don't mean anything with anybody anymore. It was a challenge, and especially being a challenge like it always is, at Laramie, to get people to travel. Luckily, we have, the resources to where we can get teams to come here and pay for teams to come here. And luckily for us to be able to do that, it also provides a safer environment for our players, because the more that we don't have to get on a plane, the more that we don't have to travel, the better off that we're going to be. I mean, I do feel like Laramie right now is one of the safer places to be, and so if we can try to play as many games as we possibly can here, that's what we try to do, and luckily we were able to do that. In the case of Oregon State, with the guarantee that we're able to get there, I think we're going to be able to charter, so it's not like we're going to have exposure, having to go to DIA and then having to fly to Portland and then making our way down to Corvallis. And so that was kind of one of our things, is if we're going to play a team like Oregon State, the guarantee is going to have to be such to where we feel like that we can charter and make our way there. And then we're going to have to decide with the Utah Valley, how we're going to do that, because as you guys well know, come December time, trying to take a charter bus along I-80 can provide a lot of challenges, and I'm not sure how safe that could be. I'm not sure what's worse, I mean, from a safety standpoint, being on a bus on I-80 or being on a Southwest flight headed over the mountains to Salt Lake City.